Anyways, I'm gonna just hop right into it. I won't look at chat that much probably to help people that are just watching this from the VOD. Hopefully, but I'm gonna have to edit some like the whole like, string starting soon thing. Anyways. Without further ado, guys, let's just hop right into it. Bob's Acceptance, Part 2. After everything they'd been through together and all the amazing times they'd shared and experienced, it was more than clear to Bonbon that this was right. She belonged with Chris and Lyra, and she was ready to join them and call them her lovers. Nothing else mattered anymore, not her parents, not what other ponies thought of them being together, or even the risks that they might not be able to have a full one day. She was happy. I knew she could be happy with both of them. It was time they made their little family official and finally become a herd. Even though Bonbon wanted this more than anything, the fear of how her last time with the stallion went flooded her mind. But she did her best to purge those thoughts. Her first time hurt and was short-lived, but she loved Chris and Lyra more than anything and would gladly take any amount of pain or discomfort to be one with them. What the heck is going on in chat? Like, if I'm going to go on a tangent, I will look at chat just for the heck of it. Like, Joshua's new. Know that. Anyways. Man. I was about to say something. I don't remember what the tangent was gonna be about, but fuck. What the heck, Joshua? Anyways, Chris smiled at Bonbon before delicately pressing his lips against hers. They lingered for a while before Chris pulled back and laid down on top of her, lightly kissing her chest as he moved down her body. His soft and furry lips tickled as they brushed against her coat, causing her already racing heart to pound even faster. I felt like I read that wrong. Anyways, Bonbon whimpered anxiously as she watched Chris descend, leaving a loving trail of subtle kisses in his wake, heading towards her belly. Oh shit, it's going straight to it. He stopped at her navel, then lightly bit its outer edge, causing her hind legs to twitch suddenly as a jolt of pleasure shot through her. Chris, she whimpered as he kissed the spot he nipped, then continued his descent. Yeah, there was gonna be a build up to this. Probably was a build up last chapter, but fuck, I don't remember. I'm gonna say yes to that, Joshua. Anyways, just then a gentle hoof placed itself on Bonbon's cheek, guiding her head to the side. The earth pony allowed herself to be manipulated, locking eyes with Lyra's beautiful golden eyes. Lyra, she whimpered. Whispered. She whispered. Boom. Lyra smiled at her with a half-lit gaze when then leaned in, pressing her lips against Bonbon's, locking them in a loving embrace. Bonbon closed her eyes and reached a hoof out to gently caress Lyra's cheek. She could feel the unicorn part her lips, and she gladly reciprocated, letting Lyra's tongue slip into her mouth. She hummed in delight as their muscles massaged and danced around each other, letting their flavors mix together. Below, Bonbon could feel Chris peppering her lower abdomen with loving pecks. Just above her teeth, driving her insane with nervous anticipation. She wanted this, but was afraid of how close he was to her now. Not because of what he might do, but what he would see. She might have had some sexual experiences with him before, but this was different. He had never truly seen what she looks like down there. In fact, no stallion had ever been so close to that part of her before. She was no fool, and I knew that her breasts were slightly... Oh, wait, I said I. She was no fool and that knew that her breasts were slightly larger than the norm, and her marehood was small and odd-looking compared to other mares. She was afraid that he would see all of them and not like her in some way, but she stayed still for him the best she could. Hey, I may make mistakes, okay? Leave me alone. Chris continued to travel down in a straight line, purposely avoiding her delicate mounds as he kissed between her breasts, tickling her coat with his beard. Bonbon fought an urge to close... Fuck. Bonbon fought the urge to close her legs and hide herself from him by doing the opposite of that, by opening up even more and allowing him easier access. She could feel herself growing hotter and even more embarrassed as he drew closer and closer to her most private area, causing her to press harder into Lyra's lips and moan softly. There's no... I said I will make mistakes. I'm streaming this. I don't really care right now. Alright, where did I leave off? Right here. Chris stopped just inches away from her pulsating clitoris. He repositioned himself, getting more comfortable as he lay down in the field of flowers between her legs. He moved his hands down her body, then wrapped his arms under and around her thighs, holding her there. Bonbon reflexively tried to close her legs out of the overwhelming feeling of doubt and embarrassment, but they wouldn't budge. Chris's powerful arms held her firmly, keeping her open and available to him. That thought alone made her heart jump out of her chest and blush even more. She nervously whimpered into Lyra's mouth as they continued to kiss, waiting for his judgment. Meanwhile, Lyra glided her hoof down Bonbon's neck and chest as their tongues wrestled with each other. She stopped at the side of the earth pony's barrel and started to gently rub her affectionately. The gesture helped Bonbon to relax a little as Chris continued to gaze at her lower half, but she was still worried. She knew Chris was used to seeing Lyra up close like this, but she could never compare to Lyra's beauty. Even Silverwing admitted that she looked strange before they slept together. Without warning, Chris lightly... Fuck. Oh, man. Let's move this again. Without warning, Chris lightly kissed the tip of Bonbon's left teat, tickling her with his prickly and soft lips, sending a jolt of pleasure down her spine. She jerked her head back, separating her lips from Lyra's as she gasped out in shock. She reflexively tried to close her legs again, but Chris held her open. Chris, she whimpered nervously, peering down at him. Their eyes met, and he smirked before descending again, giving her stiff nipple a firm lick, pinning it back against her soft mound. She had to bite her lip to try and suppress a lewd moan with little success. Lyra smirked and nuzzled a little closer to Bonbon, pressing their cheeks together while she gazed down to where Chris was. She then wrapped her foreleg around Bonbon and held her close. Bonnie loves it when you suck on them. Lyra, Bonbon half shouted, covering her muzzle behind her hooves as her embarrassing and shameful secret was revealed. Don't say stuff like that. Oh? Chris questioned, raising an eyebrow at Lyra before humming to himself in mock contemplation. Is that a fact? He hovered his lips over her nipple that was covered in his saliva, letting his warm breath tickle her before blowing on it softly. Bonbon's whole body shivered as cold air hit her wet teeth, causing her muscles to tighten. Shrew whimpered through her pursed lips while he continued to tease her to no end. Chris chuckled a bit at her reaction and hovered over her erect nipple. He lifted his lips seductively as he gazed into her eyes, opening his jaws to let her insensitive nub enter his hungry mouth, then sealed his lips around it firmly. He rolled his tongue around the stiff flesh, causing her hind legs to kick out and jerk in his grasp. Chris, Bonbon whispered in a helpless stutter. She started to unknowingly roll her hips. As he massaged and caressed her teat with his warm, wet muscle, she shivered in delight once he started to suck on her, pulling her tender teat into his mouth, which only added to the sensation. Her imagination ran wild with fantasies of Chris as her hungry little colt suckling on her, trying desperately to draw out her milk. That little fantasy alone sent a pleasant tingle through her body, and she moaned loudly into her hooves. Chris smiled around the firm flesh trapped between his lips as he listened to Bonbon's muffled cries of pleasure. He started to suck harder, pressing the tip of her nipple to the roof of his mouth, with his tongue, drawing out even louder, muffled reactions from the helpless mare. Alright. Need to move this back. Up. So what's going on here? Boop, boop, boop. This is the best part of the channel. You're get ahead of here. That's probably true, actually. Leave me alone. All right. All right. Lyra lit up her horn using her worm magic to hold Bonbon's neglected teat. She twisted it firmly, causing Bonbon to clench her eyes shut. You like that, don't you, Bonnie? She teased, sending more magic through her horn to help stimulate her lover even more. Lyra, Bonbon gasped loudly with a bright blush. I, she tried to say between her pants, but was silenced when Lyra pulled on her teat while Chris continued to suck on her like a starving fool. Her whole body trembled as her arousal started to peak. She couldn't believe how much this was turning her on. It was so exciting to have both of them tending to her in such a way, but she had to hold back. She would be mortified if she climaxed now and right in front of Chris. Wait, you were screen recorded the original? Whatever. In front of Chris, okay. Chris pulled his head back, letting Bonbon's now tender and wet nipple pop out of his mouth, while at the same time Lyra relaxed her magic mouth, much to the helpless Earth Pony's relief. But before she could relax, Chris released her legs and brought his hands around to rest on the inside of her thighs. He smoothed his palms over her coat, causing her to spread her legs out even more as he lowered his head to her most private area. No, Bonbon whimpered in a nervous whisper. This was it. Soon she will know what Chris truly thought of her. He didn't say anything about her breast, but he hadn't seen the worst part of her yet. She silently prayed that he would like what she had to offer, but mentally prepared herself for rejection. What's going on with Simba? What are you talking about? I think you're talking about Killer. It's okay, Bonnie, Lyra reassured her in a whisper, sensing the Earth Pony's discomfort while she rubbed her chest with her. This is kind of his thing. He likes to see. Bonbon wasn't entirely sure what Lyra meant by that. She was about to ask, but Chris's hands started to drift closer to her aching merhood, interrupting her thoughts. She peered out over her clothes at him, wondering what he was going to do, but before she could even begin to speculate anything, he placed his thumbs at her entrance and lightly traced her labia up and down. She remembered him doing something like this before, and it felt nice, but it only confused her more. What was he... Suddenly, Chris dipped the tips of his thumbs into her slit, then pulled his hands apart, spreading her delicate merhood open for his viewing pleasure. Are you helping Simon right now? Is that what's going on, Color? The fuck? Right, we're right here. Oh my gosh! Bonbon half shouted with a bright blush as her eyes widened in surprise. Her legs twitched and her merhood tried to contract in an effort to close itself. But it was no use. Chris held her labia open, revealing her soft pink insides to him. She had never been this exposed in front of any pony before. Not even Lyra had ever seen that part of her, but now Chris could see everything. It embarrassed her to no end, and she could cover her face behind her hooves again. She could feel her love tunnel spasming in the cool breeze, making her picture the horrific scene that Chris must be seeing in her mind. She prayed to Celestia that he wouldn't turn away in disgust. Don't look. It's horrible. Bonnie, Chris called to her softly, causing her to lower her hooves just enough so she could see him. You're beautiful. Bonbon's heart skipped a beat, and her blush deepened at his words. The look in his eyes and the tone in his voice told her that he was being completely honest. You like it? She asked awkwardly in a quiet whisper, causing Lyra to giggle next to her. Chris smiled as he gazed into Bonbon's eyes. He leaned down and tenderly kissed her sensitive love button in the middle of a lewd wink, causing her to gasp sharply and jerk her hips up at the sudden sensation. I love it, he breathed softly. Baba smiled happily behind her hooves. He truly thought she was beautiful and wasn't disgusted in the slightest. She still felt a little dirty and embarrassed for being so open, but if he loved it, well, then she wouldn't mind if he wanted to keep looking, even though it was a little strange. Chris's sights drifted back to Bonbon's exposed mirrorhood. He leaned in closer, sticking his tongue out before slowly licking over her convulsing love tunnel. Chris had a gasp in response. He put his tongue back into his mouth and paused, humming to himself in thought. What is it? Bonbon whimpered, worried that Chris was having second thoughts. Lyra grinned, snuggling a little closer to Bonbon, tenderly rubbing her belly with a hoof. How does she taste? She asked Chris. It fucking typo is in a sensual tone. Lyra, don't ask him that! Bonbon shouted in embarrassment. Chris chuckled before going in for another long and agonizing slow lick, gathering up more of her sweet nectar on his tongue before pulling it back into his mouth, smacking his lips a few times. Tastes like vanilla. I like it. Alright, what's going on? Guys, progress more. I think I'm gonna check the chat every time I have to scroll up. Or scroll down, I mean. Shower there. I've got jokesters in chat. Love it. Bonbon squeaked in embarrassment, hiding behind her hooves again. She couldn't believe what he was saying about her, but before she could dwell on it further, Chris leaned down again, pressing his broad muscle to her entrance before sweeping upwards. She gasped in surprise, feeling her fur stand on end as his warm tongue firmly kneaded her exposed and delicate insides. Bonnie, Lyra cooed as she leaned up a bit, pushing Bonbon's hooves away from her face. Left Bunny looked over to Lyra, patting her lips to quell any and all lewd sounds she wanted to make, while Chris continued to tend to her from below. Excuse me. Just relax and enjoy yourself. Lyra kissed her on the nose and moved to nibble under her ear. Baba moaned in delight from being assaulted on both ends. She reached her hoof out and gently placed it on Lyra's side, rubbing her coat up and down gingerly. Oh, how she loved and admired Lyra's body, and with how aroused she was, she wanted her more than anything. Okay, let me bookmark. What is he trying to say? Yeah, don't spam too much. Do we have stuff for a reason? Okay. Without knowing it herself, Bonbon's hoof started to slowly move down Lyra's sleek form, heading towards her petite and perfectly shaped breasts. The beautiful unicorn's body started to warm up as her hoof glided down across. Her hoof glided across her soft mint green belly, inching inching closer to its intended goal. It had been so long since they last made love. She just wanted to make Lyra happy and enjoy her beauty some more. Fuck, killer, what is it, man? Lyra smirked and leaned back. She placed her hoof onto Bonbon's forelegs, stopping her movements before she could reach her desired destination. Bonbon whimpered sadly as she gazed into Lyra's eyes. She was about to complain, but Lyra stopped her with a kiss. I forgot that was blacklisted. I got an idea, Lyra whispered in a sensual and a sweet voice as she stood up. She positioned herself directly above Bonbon's body before turning around and flicking her tail to the side, revealing everything to her. Is this what you want, Bonnie? She wiggled her back, said in a suggestive manner, teasing the moaning earth pony with its perfection. Damn, its perfection. Now that the emote was blacklisted because the last time somebody was pissing me off. That's why that's blacklisted. Bonbon could see how aroused Lyra was, and it excited her even more. Her glistening slit winked and dripped with arousal as she swayed her hips, taunting with its beauty. She quickly nodded her head in response to Lyra's question before reaching her hooves. out to hold the unicorn's cutie marks. She then pulled Lyra back, guiding her to sit on top of her muzzle. Lyra's motherhood came within inches of her lips, and she held the unicorn there, taking in the view for a moment before leaning up to tenderly lick her soft folds. Lyra gasped as Bonbon lapped at her outer edge, flickering her tail from side to side, brushing the top of Bonbon's head. She bit her lip while the Earth Pony tended to her. Bonbon's broad and thirsty tongue went right to work on Lyra's clenching nethers with eager laps, causing the unicorn to pant. As her body shuddered in delight, she gave a long, deep lick into her lover, savoring her minty flavor that she enjoyed quite a lot. Maybe a little bit too much. Lyra groaned and pushed her hips back into Bonbon's stimulating muscle. Bonnie, she breathed at her as her hind legs started to tremble. Chris was still enjoying Bonbon's sweet nectar from below, licking slowly so he could savor everything. Once he had his fill, he let go of her labia, letting her playable lips slowly close before wrapping his arms around her thighs again. He closed his eyes and pressed his lips to her entrance, dipping his tongue in as far as it could go before sweeping upwards, massaging her love tunnel with his firm muscle. What the heck, Simon? What are you doing? Don't abuse that too much, Simon. Come on. Oh shit. Fucking headphones, man. Oh, bomb. Yeah, I agree. Wait, 300 seconds? What, Saima? Come on. Bonbon clenched her eyes shut before moaning loudly into Lyra's backside, sending tingling vibrations into the unicorn's body. She did her best to ignore the feelings Chris was giving her, but wait, what? Sending tingling vibrations into the unicorn's body. She did her best to ignore the feelings Chris was giving her, but that was next to impossible. Her hips trembled and pushed up into his mouth all on their own, seeking out more of his affection. With how worked up she was, she could already feel her climax peaking once again, but she held back the best she could, focusing on the beautiful mare before her, increasing her efforts to please the unicorn. Chris hugged Bonbon's thighs in his powerful arms, diving deeper, causing her hips to roll and squirm in his grasp, as if she was trying to escape. This only encouraged him more, and he pressed his tongue deeper into her honey pot, lapping and drinking up her warm essence, greedily, determined to send her over the edge. Bonbon desperately tried to wiggle out of Chris's grasp and close her legs, feeling her climax quickly approaching. He was driving her insane, and with Lyra's beautiful backside directly in front of her, she knew she wouldn't last much longer. Her body locked up, and she started to lick into her lover even more, doing everything in her power to hold herself back. She couldn't let herself go. This was their first moment together, as I heard, and she couldn't do something so shameful and rude. Especially not when Chris was right there. Lyra's hind legs trembled weakly, making it increasingly more difficult to keep her balance while Bonbon's tongue thrusted into her wildly. Her motherhood grasped down on the invading muscle, signaling her end. She pressed her hips down onto Bonbon's muscle even more as she rocked back and forth, letting her tongue loll out of her mouth as she moaned loudly into the forest. Hey, she hasn't been touched like this since, I don't know. Fucking, I don't know, man. Into the forest. Okay, letting her tongue loll out of her mouth as she moaned loudly into the forest. Just then, Chris pulled back before diving in again, wrapping his lips around Bonbon's clit in the middle of a hard wing, trapping her sensitive nub in his mouth. He started to aggressively lick and suck on her tender button, causing the Earth Pony to let out a loud, muffled cry. Bonbon had no chance now. Try as she might, she couldn't hold it back any longer. She desperately tried to push Lyra off her so she could warn Chris, but it was too late. Her hind legs extended outwards in his grasp, and Her muscles tightened up. Her whole body twitched as she splashed Chris's chin with her warm essence, groaning loudly into Lyra's backside. As wave after wave of pure bliss hit her, her mind buzzed with a pleasurable fog while Chris continued to hungrily suck on clitoris, prolonging her climax. The intensive vibrations emanating Bonbon's cries were enough to send Lyra over the edge. She closed her eyes while her horn started to glow with a bright golden aura as she came. She groaned loudly while her body was rocked with waves of bliss. Soon her horn fizzled out into nothing and she collapsed forward onto Bonbon's body. Each one of her limbs twitched and spasmed as she convulsed over the incapacitated incapacitated earth pony below her. She whimpered helplessly, wrapping her forelegs around Bonbon's hips, nuzzling her head between her lover's soft breasts, letting her orgasm subside. The heck is going on? Yeah, it's dead, sadly. Sadly, it's dead. The doctor. It's been around before, I think. Joshua's new. Leather is new. Of course, since Sam was mama, she's been around. Alright. Chris kept his hold on Bonbon as her peak. What? Anyways, I'm getting distracted. Chris kept his hold on Bonbon as her peak slowly died down. He finally released her sore clit and started to lick her now dripping marahood, lapping up as much of the sweet nectar as he could. Bonbon panted heavily, coming back down from her high. Her back legs twitched every time she felt Chris lick her now overly sensitive marahood, and her breathing became more steady once her mind began to clear. Unfortunately for her, she quickly realized what she had just done. Oh no, she whimpered helplessly as a deep blush appeared on her face. She hid herself behind her hooves again, feeling mortified for what just happened. In a daze, Lyra lifted her head and opened her eyes. Seeing Chris's smiling face in front of her, she drunkenly smiled at the glistening mess on his lips and beard. She giggled before leaning in to lick Bonbon's arousal off of him, cleaning his face and beard. Once she was done, Chris smirked and kissed Lyra deeply, letting their tongues wrap around each other, giving her a full taste of Bonbon's orgasm. They lingered for a while before slowly pulling apart. Lyra hummed in joyful delight, savoring Bonbon's flavor. You always taste amazing, Bonnie. Lyra hummed in joyful delight. You always taste amazing, Bonnie. She teased playfully, leaning in to lick Chris's lips. After a while, without receiving an answer, Lyra lifted her hips and right leg, peering under her body at the unresponsive mirror below her. Bonnie, are you alright? No fighting, you two. That's all I gotta say to you in chat. Bonbon peeked out from behind her ears with tears in her eyes. I tried to warn you, but I'm so sorry, Chris. Lyra dropped her leg down slightly, then looked back at Chris in confusion. He seemed to be just as baffled as she was. Why are you sorry? Lyra asked in confusion, standing up and turning around to face Bonbon before finally getting it. Wait, what? Okay. I totally lost track where I was at. Anyway, I gotta reread this again. Lyra dropped her leg down slightly, then looked back at Chris in confusion. You seem to be just as baffled as she was. Why are you sorry? Lyra asked in confusion, standing up and turning around to face Bonbon before finally getting away. Wait, are you sorry for coming on Chris's face? Lyra! Bonbon shouted from behind her ears as her blush deepened. Do you have to say it like that? Lyra rolled her eyes and lay down next to her. Fuck. Hey, come on now, she cooed lovingly, pushing Bonbon's hooves away from her face. Chris loves that kind of stuff. You don't need to feel ashamed about it. Especially when you're with us, Chris added, as he crawled over to lay next to Bonbon's other side. He placed his hand directly on her belly, rubbing her reassuringly. Besides, Lyra's right. I really enjoy it when mares do that. I was actually kind of hoping I could get you to squirt like that again. Bonbon whimpered. Bashfully. Bonbon whimpered bashfully. Do you have to use that word? What? Squirt? Wait, what? Squirt? Lyra asked with a sly grin. That's just what it's called, Bonnie. Bum bum bum. Shoot. Oh, it's not. Okay, it's a normal word. Would you prefer it if you called it your happy fun fountain time? Chris teased with a chuckle, causing Lyra to burst into a fit of laughter. Man, I forgot that was a little line in here. Even though Bonbon was as red as a cherry now, she couldn't help but smile. No, the other word is fine, I suppose, she admitted in a bashful tone before looking between her loved ones, feeling a little more at ease. So you mean you really like it? She asked nervously, tapping her hooves together. You don't think it's weird or rude of me to just squirt on you? Well, a warning would have been nice, Chris teased, but of course I love it. It's just... Bonbon started to say, but hesitated, taking in a small breath. She continued. I feel so embarrassed when I do that. I know it's more than what most mares produce. Both Chris and Lyra snorted, trying to hold in their laughter. Well, that just means there's more of us to love, so don't feel ashamed, okay? Chris said, rubbing her chest reassuringly. See, Bonnie, Lyra added happily, now you have two lovers in your life that like it when you come in ocean. What? Ah, man, there's jokes in here and I love it. Bonbon sighed and shook her head, but kept her smile all the same. She was still unbelievably embarrassed by what she did, but she was definitely feeling a lot more comfortable with herself now. Well, it certainly is nice to have two weirdos in my life that could love a mare like me. She teased back at them, sticking her tongue out a little. Both Chris and Lyra nodded their heads in agreement. Can't argue with that, Lyra admitted happily. Chris ran his hand through Bonbon's curly mane before placing his palm on her cheek, holding her there for a moment. Did you want to keep going? Bonbon wrapped her forelegs around his arm and smiled up at him before nodding her head. I do. I'm ready. Chris smiled and pushed himself up, setting back in the field of flowers. Both Bonbon and Lyra did the same, sitting up on their haunches as they watched him. Shut up, phone. He reached for them of his shirt. Wait. He reached for the hem of his shirt and started to take it off, but was stopped once Bonbon placed her hoof on his lap. Yeah. Wait, Bonbon said nervously. Chris gave her a concerned and confused look, releasing his grip on his shirt. What's the matter? Are you okay? We don't have to do this now if you're uncomfortable. Yeah, it seems dead. Shut up, phone. Try to be quiet. Bonbon shook her head in response, keeping her hoof on his lap. As she scooted a little closer to him, she bit her lips, studying him up and down slowly before setting her sights on the hem of his shirt. She started to say, but stopped as she timidly placed her other hoof on his stomach, fitting his smooth skin through the fabric. She took a moment to admire his unique form through those pesky clothes he always wore, letting her imagination run wild with thoughts of what he looked like before sighing softly. You're always wearing these silly things, she said while fidgeted with the edge of his shirt. I don't like it if I could. Meanwhile, Lyra slowly crawled up behind Bonbon and wrapped her forelegs around the unaware earth pony. She let her head rest against Bonbon's neck just above her shoulders and looked down, watching her play with Chris's shirt. You want to take his clothes off yourself? Lyra asked in a sly, lowing whisper as her tail swayed from side to side. Bonbon blushed and nodded her head, keeping her gaze downward. She slid her hooves under his shirt and gently rubbed his lower abdomen, feeling the comforting warmth emanating from his body. Chris sat up straight, giving Bonbon easier access and letting her know that it was okay for her to continue. Without any hesitation, Bonbon moved her forelegs up, taking Chris's shirt with them. As her hooves glided across his smooth skin, he ducked down a bit so she could reach the top of his tall body, then raised his arms up, helping her to lift the clothing up over his head, letting it fall off to the side somewhere. She let her hooves rest on his bare chest and stayed there, studying his semi-naked form with a half-lit gaze. Chris chuckled lightly as he sat perfectly still. "What do you think?" As if in a daze, Bonbon mumbled something that sounded like a yes, not actually hearing anything Chris had said, which caused her Lyra to giggle. Bonbon had seen Chris with parts of his clothing. Bonbon had seen Chris with parts of his clothing off before, but this would be her first time seeing him close, and she really did like the way he looked. No, he wasn't a pony, but he was charming all the same. His large and intimidating stature was enough to send shivers down her spine, but it was so much more than that. The exotic shape of his body and the way his muscles formed on his chest and arms had always appealed to her. It was so different than what she was used to, but different in the best way possible. He was incredibly handsome, and she was no longer ashamed to admit that she loved him inside and out. "Having fun, bonding?" Lyra teased as she kissed her cheek. Yeah, it's fine, man. I'm just restreaming this, so it just goes into a video. That's why I've been streaming the past days. It's good, Joshua. Bonbon hummed happily, letting her hooves glide down Chris's fit form, stopping at his waist. It didn't take her long to notice a very large and quite painful-looking bulge in his pants. It twitched every now and then, demanding to be released from the fabric prison, showing off just how aroused he was. There wasn't a lot about a stallion anatomy that Bonbon was familiar with, but she knew enough to know that there was no way he could be comfortable right now. Bonbon whimpered sadly, feeling terrible for Chris's condition. She needed to get him out of there, but she wasn't really sure how to do that. The hooves were too bulky to really work the button on his pants, but maybe she could use her teeth. "Here, let me help," Lyra cooed as she nuzzled Bonbon's cheek, using her magic to unfasten Chris's pants so she could take them off easier. The buttons could be tricky with hooves. "Thank you," Bonbon said quietly, moving her hooves to Chris's side, letting them rest just above the waistband. Chris sat up on his knees, giving her easier access, letting her slowly pull his pants down only to reveal more clothing underneath. Bonbon groaned quietly in disappointment, gazing at the boxers that seemed to be suffocating his stallionhood. She completely forgot that he liked to wear clothes in layers. She knew he had to do that to help protect himself from the elements since he didn't have fur, but sometimes she thought he went a little overboard. There just didn't seem to be any reason that he needed to wear this underlayer of clothing when the outer layer kept him perfectly safe and warm. Perhaps one day she could convince him to wear less, but for now he needed to be set free. Smiling to herself, Bonbon leaned forward, then gently bit the fabric that contained his impressive bulge. She could feel the heat emanate from him. The scent was strong now, and she closed her eyes, taking a moment to let his aroma fill her senses. She couldn't explain why, but there was something about his musk that she just loved. Other stallions seemed far more offensive in comparison. Not that she had a lot of stallions to compare with, except for Silverwing, and Chris was 100 times nicer than him. Opening her eyes again, Bonbon pulled Chris's boxers down. The elastic band caught on his stiff erection, pulling it down before letting it pop out, causing it to spring up in front of her. Bonbon released the fabric in her mouth, letting it fall to Chris's knees as she watched his member throb and twitch in the air, standing proudly before her. Admittedly, it had been a while since she had last seen this part of him, and he seemed even larger than she remembered. It was both thrilling and a bit frightening to see. Alright, chat time. Why is it... I'm going with some random ass Chris, Sima. Like most of these stories that I read, for some reason there's Chris involved. I don't know why. Okay. Joshua, is that you? I'm not gonna say any words about that name under Simon's little comment. Fuck. Lyra walked up from behind Bon Bon, then stood next to her as she gazed at Chris's completely exposed form. Like, smirking wickedly, she placed a hoof on him, then gently guided him to sit back. Chris gladly obeyed, sitting back before kicking off the rest of his clothing and shoes, letting them fall somewhere in the field of fire lilies. He sat there with his legs stretched out before him and waited patiently. Lyra purred playfully, then laid over his left leg, pinning him under her. She reached a hoof out and placed it on the back of his throbbing member, keeping him steady so she could press her nose against his spire. She nuzzled him for a moment before taking in a deep breath and slowly exhaled. Her tail flicked from side to side as she hummed in delight, before turning her head back to Bon Bon with a sultry gaze. "Are you gonna help me with this?" she asked, fluttering her eyelashes a bit. "I don't think I can handle it all on my own." Bon Bon swallowed nervously as her heart rate quickly shot up, seeing the way Lyra was nuzzling Chris. Wait, fuck. Bon Bon swallowed nervously as her heart rate quickly shot up, seeing the way Lyra was nuzzling Chris made her excitement grow even more. There was just something so erotic and thrilling about the scene before her. It was admittedly very sexy. Without saying a word, Bon Bon joined Lyra, laying down on Chris's other leg. Once she was comfortable, she leaned in and pressed her nose against his throbbing stallion hood, closing her eyes as she nuzzled him in the same way that Lyra did. She cooed happily at the feeling of his wonderful hardness against her muzzle before taking in a deep breath, letting his natural scent fill her nostrils. Oh, that's killer. I thought that was fucking Joshua. Lyra giggled, going back to rubbing her snout up and down Chris's length, playfully, breathing softly through her nose all the while. Chris took in a breath as both mares pressed into him, pinning him between their muzzles, while their warm breath tickled his aching erection, causing it to twitch in anticipation. I feel like I fucked up a lot there. Anyways, Bubba let her tongue slip out of her mouth before licking Chris from his base to the tip in one slow motion, coating his underside in her saliva. She went in for a second lick, but paused halfway, pressing her warm, wet muscle against him as she hummed quietly to herself, enjoying his familiar taste. "I like the way you think, Bonnie," Lyra said as she copied Bobon's actions, slowly licked Chris on the other side, which caused him to groan in pleasure. Bobon continued her delicate ministrations, taking her time to enjoy Chris's salty taste. After a while, she started to get a little more curious and wanted to see what else she could do to please him. This was the perfect time to explore and even learn a little more about stallions in the process. Hopefully, she would find something that he would really enjoy. Based that username on a friend. What? We're not even halfway there. Opening her eyes, Bonbon looked up at Chris with a half-lit gaze before pressing her lips against the side of his twitching member. Their sights met, and she began to tenderly suck on the side of his tall spire, lightly pulling his smooth skin into her mouth. Chris groaned in pleasure, giving Bonbon the reaction she was hoping for. She giggled at the back of her throat, then continued to suckle on him, making a mental note that he liked what she was doing. Meanwhile, Lyra moved her head up and then placed Chris's pink tip against her lips. She let her tongue roll around his head for a while, coating him in her saliva and cleaning off any pre-cum that had formed. She hummed softly in anticipation before taking his sensitive crown into her waiting maw, pressing her lips around him tightly as she slowly descended around him. Chris groaned loudly, and his legs quivered beneath both mares as they tended to him. His breathing became more labored, and he flexed his stomach muscles in a vain attempt to try and quell his impending climax that was already started to well up. Papa relished in the sounds they were eliciting. from Chris, which in turn caused her own arousal to build once again, and only encouraged her to continue onward. Feeling more playful and adventurous, she tried to think of new ways she could please him. But with her limited knowledge and experience with stallion anatomy, she was at a loss. All she had to go on were stories Lyra and her friends had told her. She had to keep exploring and experimenting to see what else Chris would like. With that in mind, she started to descend lower to where she had heard stallions are very sensitive, gently kissing and sucking on the side of his stallionhood in the process. As Bonbon moved, Lyra began to bob her head up and down, taking more of Chris's length into a hungry, suckling muzzle. She swallowed a few times, attempting to milk him as she slowly worked her way down, taking an inch after inch of his member into her mouth. Bonbon quickly reached her desired destination, letting her nose brush against Chris's hefty balls, taking in his musky scent where it was the strongest. Her mind buzzed, drunk with pleasure, and she sighed happily before trying to think of what to do next. She knew that a stallion's testicles were very delicate, and she was sure it was the same way with Chris. He wasn't that different after all. She remembered hearing a few of her friends say that some stallions enjoy it when a mare tends to their beanbag. So maybe Chris would like that as well. With that in mind, she let her tongue slip out of her mouth and slowly licked his sack. Almost instantly, she heard a deep moan come from above her, signaling that her actions were bearing fruit. Feeling more confident, Bonbon took one of Chris's delicate orbs into her maw and started to tenderly suck on it, rolling her tongue over it, feeling exactly how fragile it was. Takes multiple hours to complete one chapter because I'm just used to 1 hour shit right now. Like I said, fuck man, I'll switch it up after this reading. After this reading, actually, like if I like the description, maybe, and if I don't like the description, then no. All right, I'm gonna finish this water, man. Okay, sweet Celestia Bonnie, Chris groaned in a shaky voice. Oh, sweet Celestia Bonnie, sweet Celestia Bonnie, Chris groaned in a shaky voice as his legs started to tremble beneath him. Bonbon mentally cheered to herself, feeling giddy and victorious for having found something else that Chris really enjoyed. She made another mental note before continuing to suck on him lovingly, humming around him in joyful delight. Okay, this is kinda hard when it says like. Lyra is mumbling. Good job, Bonnie. Lyra mumbled through her mouthful as she peered down at the earth pony. Bonbon pulled back, letting Chris's fragile testicles pop out of her mouth before looking up to Lyra with a slight scowl. Lyra, don't talk with your mouth full, she chastised in a teasing manner, then leaned down and wrapped her tongue around Chris's sack, guiding him back into her mouth. Lyra giggled, going back to slowly bobbing her head on Chris's stiff member, following the natural curve of his erection as she moved. She worked her way down, inching her way closer to his base as Bonbon tended to him from below. Girls, Chris grunted helplessly, placing his hands on the back of their manes. It's too much. You have to stop. This only made Lyra work even more. Wait, what? Fuck. Only... Fuck. Guys making me fucking stop. This only made Lyra work even more. She descended even more, taking him to the base, cramming everything he had against the back of her throat. She hummed and swallowed thickly, letting her throat muscles massage his tip, desperately trying to milk him for all he was worth. Bonbon also doubled her efforts, sucking on his delicate orb even harder. Chris's whole body trembled. His hands gripped the back of their manes and his eyes screwed shut. Girls! He tried to warn them a second time, but they weren't listening. They both knew what was coming. Bonbon wanted to give Chris the best feeling she could, and she didn't mind if they had to wait a day or two until he was in the mood again, so they could finally be one. Yeah. You have to wait a day or two. No, you don't. As long as Chris was happy, she was happy, and she knew Lyra would feel the same way. With that in mind, she started to swirl her tongue around his sack, moaning loudly as she worked. Not fair, Chris moaned his shaky complaint as his legs locked up under the two mares. Bonbon could feel Chris's balls start to recede into his body, which surprised her, determined not to lose the one between her lips. She started to suck and swallow even more, trying to pull him back out. She then opened her eyes and looked up to Lyra, who was still pressing her lips against his base, holding him inside her muzzle as she swallowed thickly. Yeah, Killer. If it's more than 1 hour long, I want to say capping it at 2 hours would be the best thing for this channel. So no. Chris threw his head back and cried out as his orgasm overwhelmed him. His whole body became stiff and his hips tried to jerk upwards, wanting to fit more of himself inside Lyra's mouth. His testicle pulsed inside Bonbon's maw. Excuse me. As he released his powerful load deep into Lyra's throat. Then experienced Earth Pony watched as Lyra smiled around her mouthful and pulled back slightly, revealing some of Chris's now glistening length. While it throbbed between her tightly pressed lips, she could see his veins starting to pop out as the stallion would continue to pulse and pour hot seed into Lyra's awaiting muzzle over and over again. Her eyes widened in awe and wonderment as she witnessed her stallion for the first time climax up close. It was an amazing sight, and in a lot of ways, she was strangely jealous of Lyra. Fuck! Chris started relaxing his grip on both their manes, then collapsed backwards into the field of fire lilies. He laid there, desperately trying to catch his breath as he rolled out his high. Bonbon released a sack from her mouth, then sat up, keeping her sight locked on Lyra. The unicorn kept her lips sealed around Chris's slowly deflating member, humming in contentment. She started to pull back slowly, cleaning off his twitching phallus, not letting any of his precious essence escape her lips. His tip popped out of her mouth and fell against his lower abdomen, glistening with her saliva, and as clean as could be. Tongue up. Shut up. Bonbon pouted slightly. She knew it was a little perverted, but she actually really enjoyed the way Chris tasted, and she kind of wanted to get that chance to taste him again. Just then, Lyra turned to Bonbon with a half-lit gaze and placed a hoof behind the Earth Pony's back, gently guiding her to lean forward. Feeling slightly confused, Bonbon did as Lyra directed. Wait, what? Oh, I don't care. I do it all the time. Shush. Not all the time. I do it most of the time when I read. God damn it. Where was I? Bonbon pouted slightly. She knew it was a little perverted, but she actually really enjoyed the way Chris tasted, and she kind of wanted to get that chance to taste him again. Just then, Lyra turned to Bonbon with half-lit gaze and placed a hoof beyond the Earth Pony's back, gently guiding her to lean forward. Feeling slightly confused, Bonbon did as Lyra directed, letting their lips connect in a loving embrace. She could feel Lyra's lips slowly part once they connected, and she gladly reciprocated. As soon as she did so, Chris's thick and warm seed poured out of Lyra's mouth and began to fill her own, much to her shocked and welcomed surprise. God damn it, Simon! Don't abuse that power. There we go. I don't even know what the fuck I'm saying. I'll focus on the reading. Bonbon shut her eyes and wrapped her forelegs around Lyra, pulling her close while pushing harder into their kiss. She swallowed thickly as Chris's wonderfully sweet and salty liquid continued to spill from Lyra's lips, tickling her taste buds. Both mares hummed in delight as they consumed the tasty treat together. They soon pulled apart, ending their kiss, leaving behind a thin line of white that connected their lips together. Lyra giggled before leaning in, licking Bonbon's lips, severing the thin bridge that connected them. Holy shit, Chris said weakly in dumbfounded awe as he propped himself up with his elbows, causing... Gotta... scroll up more. Causing both mares to turn and look at them. That was a lot. I mean, that was hot. I said that was a lot. That was hot. What the fuck is wrong with me? Lyra smiled and licked her lips in a teasing manner. You like that, big guy? She cooed playfully, bringing Bonbon closer to her, pressing their cheeks together while hugging her tightly. Chris nodded his head quickly, finding talking a difficult task. Bonbon blushed brightly and giggled at Chris's reaction, hugging Lyra a little closer as her gaze drifted lower on Chris's body. Her eyes widened and she gasped in surprise when she saw how hard he still was. What? She stuttered in confusion. How are you still? She cut herself off and pointed a hoof to his crotch. After what you two just did? Chris asked in excitement. How could I not be excited? Okay. Wait. So you can keep going? Bonbon asked in disbelief, relaxing her grip on Lyra. Don't you remember that I told? Fuck. Don't you remember what I told you about stallions from his world? Lyra asked, causing Bonbon to look at her with bemused expressions. His kind of go a lot longer than the stallions we're used to. Come on, you remember? Think back to when I told you about how we spent our first night together. Bonbon frowned as she thought back. She didn't remember the very detailed and unbelievable story of their first night when they became a couple, but she thought Lyra was making half of that stuff up. You mean you two really went at it all night? She asked in disbelief. I thought you were just pulling my leg. I love this whole thing, man. Like the normal stallions can't go as long as the others. It's great. I love it. It's true, Chris added, causing Bonbon to face him as he sat up straight. I was pretty sore for a couple of weeks after that, but we spent the whole night getting to know each other. He winked at Lyra, and she stuck her tongue out at him in response, blowing him a very childish raspberry. Baba still couldn't really believe what she was hearing. She might be in the dark about most things that involved the opposite sex, but there was one thing that she knew, and that was that stallions had little to no stamina, and yet Chris was right in front of her. Hey, Baban, not a normal stallion, okay? And yet Chris was right in front of her, throbbing and wanting more. They didn't have to wait another day for him to be in the mood again. They could finally be together, right? No. The thought both excited and scared Bonbon. Okay, let's see what the fuck, Leather? Killer, shut up. so can we can keep going? Bonbon asked nervously, heading herself behind her curly forelock a little. She wanted this, but she couldn't help the fear that was slowly building inside her. Thoughts of how rough Silver was with her and the pain that soon followed entered her mind. If you're ready, Chris said sweetly as he reached out a hand, placing it lightly on Bonbon's cheek to calm her nervousness a little, but not quite enough. She was still afraid of the pain that mating with the stallion came with. She wasn't a stranger to penetration, but most of her experiences were with smaller toys that she and Lyra would use on rare occasions, and Chris was much larger than any of those. Plus, it was no secret that her vagina was on the smaller side, and that's why they had to use smaller toys. She was afraid to use anything bigger, especially after her time with Silver, and Chris was around the same size he was. But that hardly mattered. She wanted to be with Chris and Lyra no matter what. I'm ready, she finally answered in a whisper, as her forelegs started to shake in nervous anticipation. Are you okay, Bonnie? Lyra asked in concern, sensing that something was wrong. You're shaking. Is everything okay? Chris asked, giving Bonbon a weird look. I'm fine, Bonbon said as she looked to Chris, putting on the best smile she could. It's just... She started to say, but paused, biting her lips. She didn't want to offend him and say that she was afraid of having sex. That wasn't his fault that she was afraid. It's just a what? Chris asked softly, moving his hand to her side, petting her reassuringly in hopes that it would help to ease her worries. Okay. Alright, what the heck is this? Oh shit. Okay, damn, didn't realize. Oh shit. Ah! Damn it. That was the most randomest question to ask Emma. Alright. You can tell us, Bonnie, Lyra added as she rubbed her back, tightening her grip around her. This is YouTube. That's all I gotta say about that, Joshua. You can tell us, Bonnie, Lyra added as she rubbed her back, tightening her grip around her. Lyra was right, and Bonbon knew it. She could tell them both anything. Wait, what? Fuck. Okay, reading chat, trying to read. Okay. Lyra was right, and Bonbon knew it. She could tell them both anything, and that thought helped her relax a little more. Well, she started to explain, feeling more confident in herself, looking between her loved ones. It's just that my first time with, sewing. Chris and Lyra both nodded, understanding, listening intently as she continued. It wasn't exactly the best first experience with a stallion for me. Wait, Lyra said, suddenly realizing, you're not afraid it's going to hurt again, are you? Bonbon nodded her head slowly. Chris was looking a little confused, but Bonbon spoke up to clarify. Severing was the first stallion I ever had sex with, and it was really painful. And you're afraid of your first time with me will hurt too? Chris asked, sounding worried and disheartened. I'm sorry, Chris, Bonbon said in a sad whisper, but I don't care. I want to be with you, even if it hurts a lot. Bonnie, Lyra deadpanned, rolling her eyes. I keep telling you that your first time hurt because you both went too fast. Don't worry, this time it will be nice, I promise. Are you sure? Bonbon asked, looking to Lyra hopefully. It's okay, Bonnie, Chris said, placing a hand on her cheek and guiding her head to face him again. He smiled and leaned in, kissing her tenderly on the lips before pulling back. I don't want to hurt you, but go as slow as you're comfortable with. Okay? What the fuck? The heck killer. Hearing Chris's words brought a smile to Bonbon's face. The idea of going at her own pace was like music to her ears. She was hoping that's how they could do things, and she felt a lot better knowing that Chris was okay with that. Thank you. I like that, she said in a gentle whisper, letting go of Lyra and wrapping a hoof around his arm. Wait, what happened? Okay, she said in a gentle whisper, letting go of Lyra and wrapping a hoof around his arm. Feeling better, Bonbon looked down to try and gauge Chris's size again, but frowned once she saw how limp he was. What's wrong? She asked in concern. Are you not, excited anymore? Well, I was really worried about you, Chris explained. Oh, Bonbon said sadly, looking away from him and feeling slightly ashamed. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you worry and kill the mood. Doo-doo-doo. Guys, with your weird ass jokes again. Lyra giggled before getting off Chris's leg, then turned to face both of them. Don't worry, Bonnie. I know how to fix him, she teased with a wink in her direction. You just relax, okay? Bonbon gave Lyra a confused look. But she wasn't sure what she meant by fix him. Well, if you're sure, she said awkwardly. Chris chuckled a bit, then gently picked her up off his leg, and then laid her down in the field of flowers in front of him. Bonbon smiled up at Chris, but furrowed her brow slightly, feeling confused about being placed on her back like this. She thought they were going to finally be one together, but this was a position that she often did with a mare, not a stallion. Did he want to see her vagina again or something? Why am I on my back like this? She asked curiously. Don't you need me to be, It's okay, Bonnie, Lyra reassured her as she walked up to Chris and sat down next to him. This is how Chris and I first did it, too. Bonbon gave them both a bemused expression. So we do it just like this with me on my back. Boom boom. I know it doesn't make a lot of sense right now, and it can feel a little weird at first, but trust me, you'll like it, Lyra reassured her. It's just easier for me, Chris admitted, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. If it's too uncomfortable for you, we can do it the traditional pony way. Baba wiggled around a bit, getting herself a little more comfortable. The feeling of the flowers around her helped to calm her immensely, but it was still kind of strange trying to picture how this was going to work. But if it made it easier for Chris, then she wouldn't mind. This is fine, she said with a smile. We can do it like this if you want. Lyra smirked and got up to face Chris. You heard the mirror, she teased, gazing down at his semi-hard length with a sultry gay expression. Now, let's get you ready. Bobbin watched curiously as Chris got to his knees and Lyra leaned down until she was at eye level with his waist. Lyra tenderly kissed his soft phallus, causing it to twitch in response. She giggled, then closed her eyes, letting her tongue low out of her mouth before lapping at him eagerly. Yep, Simon. Yeah, it is. It's nighttime, so I would expect this, to be honest. No, it's the same time for both of us, so yeah, I would expect this. Chris placed his hand on the back of Lyra's head, taking in slow, drawn-out breaths as she tended to him. He ran his fingers through her scion mane as she licked his stiffening member. She made sure to pay close attention to his tip, covering his already wet length and even more of her glistening saliva. Bonbon watched in amazement as Chris's stallion hood responded to Lyra's attention. It throbbed with every lick, growing larger and firmer by the second. Even though she was still nervous, she couldn't help but feel her own arousal to grow from the sight. Her mirror hood winked and ached in anticipation, becoming wetter the longer she watched Lyra tend to their stallion. Lyra started taking longer strokes as Chris continued to grow, letting her tongue run over his smooth skin from his base to tip in one long motion. Once he was at full mast, she smiled to herself and opened her eyes, leaning back to admire her work. That's better, she chirped happily as his member stood proudly in the air once again. Hard as ever, she got up and walked over to Bonbon, then laid down into the field of flowers next to her. She scooted closer to the nervous earth pony and wrapped her foreleg around her, holding their bodies close in a loving embrace. Chris took a moment to admire the beautiful mares before him. He smiled and shook his head in disbelief, thinking about how lucky he was to have fallen in love twice. He sighed happily, then leaned over them, placing his hands on the ground next to his lovers to help prop himself up. Bonbon looked up to Chris and whimpered nervously as her heart started to pound out of her chest. She bit her lip and pulled her forelegs back to her barrel, holding them there in a protective manner. It was incredibly intimidating to see him looming over them like that, but thrilling at the same time. It was like a predator ready to take his prey. As strange as it is, that idea helped her feel even more aroused. Don't worry, it won't be as bad as you think. You'll like it, Lyra whispered to Bonbon reassuringly, kissing her gently on the cheek. What a break from me. Bonbon nodded, trusting in Lyra's words. She chewed on her lip nervously as she watched Chris line his hips up with hers. She spread her legs out and made an effort to help by adjusting herself to him. Once their hips were lined up, he let his hard length rest right on top of her soft vulva, letting her feel the intense heat emanating from him. She shivered and cooed softly at the feeling. Slowly and gently, Chris pulled his hips back, using his hands to grip his member so he could better guide himself. He paused just a few inches away, then looked into Bonbon's eyes. Are you sure you're ready? Bonbon whimpered quietly, grabbing a hold of Lyra's foreleg that was wrapped around her chest for added comfort, peering down at his throbbing erection. Her body started to tremble as she thought about his question. Fuck. He mentally prepared himself for what was to come. She was ready as she would ever be, and with a deep breath she nodded her response. Chris started to move forward, but was stopped. Wait, Lyra shouted, causing both Chris and Bonbon to give her confused. Look, I've always wanted to do this, she said happily. as her horn started to glow. Bonbon could feel a tingling warmth at her motherhood, then the sudden sensation of being spread open again as the cool air of the forest hit her delicate insides. Lyra, she shouted in shock as her most private treasure was forced open by Unicorn's magic. She's waiting for you, big guy, Lyra cooed with a half-lit stare and sly, seductive grin. Sweet, merciful Luna, Bonbon muttered bashfully as she tried to hide herself behind her forelegs and curly forelock. Beautiful, Chris mumbled as he gazed down at Bonbon's spread motherhood one last time before slowly moved forward. With his hand still on his member, he guided his tip towards the throbbing entrance. Bonbon gasped in shock once she felt Chris's crown tenderly kiss her love tunnel, causing her body to stiffen and her motherhood to clench down in response. This is it. He's gonna be inside of me, she thought anxiously as her heart pounded in her chest. Something just fall? Okay, good. Boop, boop, boop. That's a paragraph. You guys probably have messed up jokes, don't you? These are messed up jokes. That's all I gotta say to both of you. Chris sighed softly as she applied more pressure, forcing his crown to sink into her warm depths with little success. Her walls sealed around him firmly as if she was trying to push him back out, making it difficult for him to enter. He began lightly rocking back and forth, prodding her entrance in an effort to try and help her loosen up. Once he thought she was ready, he took a deep breath and gave a firm hump forward, pushing her past her resistance and popping his head inside. Typos, man, typos, always there. Bonbon gasped loudly in surprise at the sudden penetration. Her hind legs bucked up as her soft inner walls reflexively clamped down on him, halting his process. Chris grunted through gritted teeth at the sudden pressure. He tried to move, but her powerful earth pony muscles held him tightly, trapping his tip inside. Body, he groaned in a shaky voice. You have to relax. It's okay, Lyra cooed into Bonbon's ear, kissing her cheek while rubbing her belly in a slow circular motion. Just relax. It'll be okay, I promise. Bonbon whimpered nervously, not really hearing what Chris or Lyra had said. She was too focused on the warm pressure between her legs that was trying to make its way inside her. It was painful, yes, but not overwhelmingly so, like it was with Silverwing, which was a small relief to her. Regardless, she held her breath and locked her body up, expecting more pain to come soon. Don't worry, Bonnie, it'll be fine, Lyra cooed, again nipping gently under the tense earth pony's ear, hoping her to release her breath, and relax just enough so that Chris could progress. Chris took a moment to compose himself, then tried to push forward again, finding a little resistance this time. It was still a struggle, but he could move in much easier now, taking things agonizingly slow. He continued to enter her well-lubricated and warm passage, swinging back and forth gradually until half of his shaft disappeared inside her. Bonbon bit her bottom lip, suppressing a moan as Chris moved deeper, stretching her inner walls apart. Her muscles spasmed and clenched around his impossibly hard stallion hood. Trying desperately to accommodate for his size, he felt almost too large for a small passage to take, but his slow movements helped her, giving her time to adjust to him as he entered. Silverwing never gave her the courtesy of taking things slow, and only now did she realize why her first experience with him was so painful. Even though she felt pain with Chris as well, it didn't feel like she was being ripped in half like it did with Silver. Well, that's gonna be painful, man. This was a good pain, which was a strange sensation for her. She had never felt so pleasantly stretched out before, but she wanted more. Man. Lyra stopped her nipping and looked down to where her loved ones were joining together. She rubbed Bonbon's chest reassuringly, snuggling a little closer to the earth pony. There you go, Bonnie. Just relax and it will be fine, she said in a soft whisper, enjoying the sight of the lovers finally become one. Once Chris was a little more than halfway in, he let go of his member, then placed his hand back on the ground to help support him. He looked into Bonbon's eyes, starting to pant as he continued to slowly move his hips towards her. Mama took in a quick and shaky breath as he pushed past where no toy had ever gone before, feeling every little detail about him, something that she never had a chance to experience with Silverwing. When she slept with him, Silver was just a blunt and painful force and nothing more, but Chris was different. He was smooth and gentle, his exotic and round tip pulsed inside her, tickling her rigid walls as he progressed, sending all kinds of pleasant, tingling sensations coursing through her body. It was the complete opposite of her ex. Eventually, Chris's hips pressed up against hers, giving her everything he had. As he hilted himself inside her, he shuddered faintly, reveling in the feeling of being completely surrounded by Bonbon's warm, wet, velvety passage. Bonnie. Bonbon shivered and her hind legs involuntarily wrapped around Chris's hips once she felt his tip gently kiss her deepest barrier. She whimpered at the sensation of being completely and utterly full. Her walls were stretched as far as they could go, and they grasped around his wonderfully warm and hard phallus, trying desperately to massage him deeper inside her. Chris, she said in a breathless whisper. Are you okay? Chris asked weakly, giving her a concerned look. Is this too much? Baba didn't respond to him right away. All she could do was focus on the amazing feeling of being filled to the very core. The pain she was feeling before had long faded and was now replaced with a blissful warmth that radiated from the union. It was like he was meant to be there, to fill her emptiness and complete her. She never wanted that feeling to end, and she smiled up at him, reaching out her forelegs to wrap around the back of his neck. It says warp. It says warp. Are you kidding me? Literally says warp right there. Warp. The back of his neck, warm, was all she could mutter as she gazed into his eyes fondly. You, alright there, Bonnie? Lyra questioned with a smirk, raising a curious eyebrow at the dazed Earth Bunny. Mm-hmm. Mama mumbled quietly with a small nod as she pulled Chris down, guiding him into a loving kiss, which he gladly accepted. They lingered there for a moment, enjoying their sensual embrace before slowly breaking their lips apart. Why doesn't scream in the oven? What? God damn it, you people with your messed up jokes. Get out of here. I mean, don't actually get out of here, but stop making jokes like that, man. Get out of here with the jokes. Chris smiled down at her with that wonderful, caring, and infectious smile of his. You ready? He asked weakly between his soft panting. Can we just stay like this? Just for a little while? Bobbin asked nervously as she gazed up at him, rubbing the back of his neck with her hoof. Chris chuckled lightly. We can if you like, he said sweetly. Just tell me when you're ready. Bonbon tightened her grip around his neck, guiding him to lean down so she could nuzzle his cheek. Thank you, she whispered into his ear before closing her eyes. Letting out a happy sigh, she let herself melt under him, focusing on the wonderful throbbing sensation between her legs. It felt like Chris's actual heart was inside her, beating alongside her own. It was an amazing feeling, and she just wanted to enjoy it for a little longer. The sweet smell of sugary oranges mixed with their combined musk filled the air around them as they embraced. It was admittedly a very relaxing aroma that caused Bonbon to intentionally take in a few drawn-out breaths through her noses, just so she could get a better sample of their combined scent with the fire lilies. She wasn't a fan of her own fragrance, but when it was mixed with her loved ones and the surrounding forest, it made her feel safe, and she loved it. Lyra snuggled a little closer to Bonbon, resting her head against the Earth Pony's neck, then said happily, I told you you'd like it, Bonnie, she boasted in a whisper, rubbing Bonbon's chest gently. Bonbon nodded her agreement. Bonbon nodded her agreement against Chris's cheek, opening her eyes. She took another short moment to enjoy their embrace before leaning up to Chris's ear. I'm ready, she whispered, relaxing her grip on him. Chris propped himself up again, then gazed into Bonbon's eyes with a gentle smile. He adjusted himself slightly, then pulled his hips back, taking that wonderful warmth with him, leaving Bonbon feeling empty again. He kept his tip inside, then paused, taking a few breaths. I'm going to move now. Okay. This is gonna be a rare blue. Okay, blue and ace. This is gonna be a little rare. This is gonna be a rare times I do this. Right now I'm rereading these because I want to reread them because I fucked up and deleted them off the channel. So that's why I'm rereading this. Okay. And I feel like I just fucking lost. You two just made me lose my fucking thing. Where the fuck was I? Okay, I'm gonna reread this from here. I'm just gonna make this up again. Chris propped himself up again, then gazed into Bonbon's eyes with a gentle smile. He adjusted himself slightly and pulled his hips back, taking that wonderful warmth with him, leaving Bonbon feeling empty again. He kept his tip inside, then paused, taking a few breaths. I'm gonna move now. Bonbon bit her lip and nodded in understanding. As he paused his hips forward again, she gasped faintly and shivered as his warmth returned, tickling her compressed walls as he tilted inside her again, stretching and filling her to completion. So big. She muttered quietly under her breath, feeling like she might burst once his tip delicately kissed her innermost barrier for a second. He pulled her back faster this time, causing her insides to quickly contract around him in a desperate attempt to keep him inside her, only for him to come crashing back, pushing her. Wait, what? Yeah, crashing back, pushing her back slightly as their hips connected. Nah. Baba moaned from the sudden but welcomed force. So tight. Chris breathed with a shiver as he started to hump into her, pulling back only to shove himself deep inside again. Baban's breathing became more steady and pronounced as Chris picked up his pace, pumping in and out of her in a steady and firm rhythm, burying himself as far as he could go with each eager thrust. She cooed in pleasure, dropping her forehead down onto his chest, feeling his pecs expanding in and out of his lungs, tried to fill his body with much needed oxygen. His sweaty skin glistened in the light, creating a glossy look to his body, something that she found quite thrilling. His naked body was reacting to their lovemaking, and she wanted to see more of it. She wanted to see him quiver with pleasure, to feel him release himself inside of her. Oh, sweet Celestia, did she want that? Chris, Bonbon muttered, gently massaging his chest with her hooves. Hearing his name being called only encouraged Chris to move faster. His breathing became more labored as he picked up speed, ramming himself inside her over and over again. Bonbon breathed in a shaky voice as his curved length kept brushing past a particularly strange shot deep inside her that she never knew she had. It felt very sensitive and tingled every time his tip grazed it, causing her to quiver with excitement. She could feel more of her feminine essence trickle down from their union, soaking into her curly tail as her arousal started to peak, making his journey into her tight, rippling passage feel even smoother. That warm feeling emanating from him was starting to spread through her, causing her own body to start sweating in response. Chris panted heavily, thrusting his hips harder into her, causing the sound of wet skin colliding with damp fur to echo into the dense forest. Excuse me. Man. This stuff, man. Gets me fucked up sometimes. Alright, Blue and Ace, are you gonna talk, or what's the deal with you two? But that wasn't what Bonbon was hearing. Bonbon's ears were focused on the pleasant sounds of Chris's heavy breathing and soft moans. It was like music to her ears, and she just wanted more. She wanted him to cry out in pure bliss from the pleasure she was giving him. The fuck? Pony, shut up. Making me lose my damn fucking shit. She wanted him to cry out in pure bliss from the pleasure she was giving him. To hear him call out her name as he climaxed with her, the thought alone sent shivers down her spine. She wasn't going to last much longer like this, and he had to be on the brink as well. Lyra hummed happily to herself, rubbing Bonbon's lower abdomen between their bodies, letting her hoof glide over her lover's breast as she watched Chris thrust into her. How does she feel, big guy? Lyra cooed seductively as she looked up to him. Chris slowed down, then giving him a firm hump forward, quickly driving himself in as far as he could go, causing Bonbon to let out an adorable squeak. He stayed there for a moment, then twisted his hips left and right, letting his sensitive crown graze against her compressed and delicately textured walls, panting heavily. Unbelievable, he finally answered weakly. Lyra smirked and turned her head towards Bonbon, letting her hoof rest between her lover's breasts. How does it feel to have Chris inside of you, Bonnie? She whispered into her ear, sending shivers down the Earth Pony's spine. Bonbon tried to answer but was cut off when Lyra pushed her hoof down on her lower abdomen, pressing that particularly strange spot inside her down onto Chris's solid and throbbing length. Does it feel good? Lyra questioned seductively, massaging between Bonbon's breasts, applying more pressure as she worked her hoof in slow circles and causing that tender area inside her to rub up against Chris's member. Lyra, Bonbon stuttered as her mind began to fog over with pleasure. The feeling of Lyra's grinding hoof wasn't lost on Chris. He groaned as Bonbon's velvety walls were forced down on top of his aching erection, encouraging him to keep going. He slowly pulled his hips back and slammed in again, grinding his tip against her spasming walls. Bonbon bit her lower lip, letting out muffled cries of pleasure from both her partner's actions. Chris started to pick up his rhythm again, grazing over that ticklish spot, and said Bonbon with that exotic tip of his over and over. Boom boom, are we almost done here? Bonbon could feel a large pressure deep inside her start to build up, demanding to be let out, but she chewed her lip hard, holding back as best she could. She wasn't going to climax until she felt him do so first. She just hoped it would be soon. There was no way she could keep going like this for long. Come on, Bonnie, Lyra cooed with an evil smirk as her horn started to glow. I want to know, how does Chris feel when he's deep inside you? Just then, Bonbon could feel a tingling warmth surrounding her pulsing clit. She opened her mouth to speak, but Lyra's magic solidified around her tender nub, cutting her off as it sent warm jolts of ecstasy through her body. Ugh. She cried out loudly in a shaky voice, locking herself up as her mind was assaulted with pleasure. Her mirror head reflexively squeezed down on Chris, causing him to slow down. But her well-lubricated walls made it easy for him to keep going, even with the vice-like pressure. I'm sorry, Bonnie. I didn't catch that, Lyra teased, tilted her head to the side, perking her ears up so she could hear better. What did you say? Her horn glowed brighter, sending more pleasurable tingles through Bonbon's throbbing clitoris while she continued to rub her hoof between her breasts, pushing her walls against Chris's thrusting member. He feels. Bonbon tried to answer, but was just too overwhelmed. It was impossible for her to make any kind of coherent thoughts anymore. She tightened her stomach muscles in a last-ditch effort to hold back her quickly approaching climax. Chris groaned loudly as he continued to buck his hips into her tightly squeezing passage. His breathing became louder and heavier to match Bonbon's as he worked. Come on, Bonnie, Lyra cooed again, leaning down until her lips were inches away from the poor incapacitated Earth Pony's ear. Tell me how he feels, she whispered softly, then nipped just under her ear where she was the most sensitive, sending magic through her horn to tickle her lover and send her over the edge. Wonderful! Bonbon cried out into the dense forest, arching her back towards the sky. As she lost herself to a barrage of ecstasy, her mirror convulsed and squeezed around Chris's member, massaging him into her hungry love tunnel as she splashed His hips with a volley of her feminine juices, her vision blurred and her mind melted into a mushy pile of pure bliss as her locked body twisted with every wave of orgasmic pleasure that washed over her. Chris grunted through clenched teeth as Boban's inner walls grasped and kneaded him tightly, halting his movements. He flexed his stomach muscles, letting her ride out her orgasm as he fought tooth and nail to hold his own end back. Boom, 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 boom. Whoa! Lyra shouted excitedly after having witnessed Bonbon soak Chris's hips. She sat up and relaxed her mouth filled of lilies as her orgasm slowly died down. Her lungs tried desperately to fill her body with oxygen as her mind began to collect itself. Her body relaxed and her hips fell limp at her sides as her head slowly rocked back and forth. Chris groaned and shivered as he slowly pulled himself out of Bonbon's squeezing marehood. Her insides seemed to suck him back in as he worked his way out. He had to use a little force, but eventually his tip slipped out of her with a wet popping sound. Springing upwards once he was free, he fell back onto his rear with a hard thud and leaned back, propping himself up with his elbows, and he tried desperately to catch his breath. The cool air of the forest brushed past his wet and aching erection, causing him to shudder, helping him to calm himself from his near orgasm. He stayed there, panting heavily as he watched Bonbons having her with a bright and happy smile. Bonnie, Lyra shouted enthusiastically. That was amazing. I don't think I've ever seen you come so much. Bonbon's dizzy mind was able to piece together what Lyra was saying, and she smiled up at her tightly. Yeah? You liked it? She replied weakly. Lyra quickly nodded her head. That was so hot. Bonbon giggled weakly, then lifted her head up and peered over at Chris. She started to frown once she saw how stiff he still was. It was then that she noticed how empty she felt as well. Not because he wasn't still inside her. No, there was something else missing. Something that she knew from experience should be there. She remembered when Silverwing had finished. He had left something behind that wasn't the most pleasurable thing in the world. In fact, she felt rather disgusted by it, but Chris was different than her ex. She wanted to feel him there, but there was just nothing. Was he not able to climax? Was she bad? Did he not like the way she felt? All these thoughts started to scare Bon, and she whimpered sadly, afraid to ask Chris what was wrong. Did you not like it? She asked him wearily as she slowly got up and shaky hips, sitting back on her haunches. Lyra got up as well, sitting next to Bonbon, then turned towards Chris, who was still trying to catch his breath. Huh? Chris breathed, confused for a moment. No, Bonnie, you were amazing. He leaned up a bit more and propped himself up with his hands before continuing. I held myself back. I came really close, but I just wanted you to enjoy yourself. But you were supposed to. Bonbon whimpered sadly, but a hoof on her shoulder interrupted her, causing her to turn her head towards Lyra. Lyra gave her a reassuring smile while rubbing her shoulder gently. It's okay, Bonnie. He did that to me the first time, too. He knows a weird trick that can help him hold it in, but I know for a fact that he was enjoying himself. Lyra gave her a reassuring smile. Right, I just read that. This helped Bonbon to feel a little better, but she was still upset that Chris hadn't finished yet. She wanted to make him happy and for him to, well, finish with her. With her husband nervously. Do you want to keep going? She asked nervously. Chris blinked up at her a few times in confusion. Well, yeah, I'd love to, but do you want to keep going? He asked her awkwardly. Bonbon nodded her head gently. She wanted to please him more than anything, even if her body was still recovering from her earth-shattering orgasm moments ago. And she was too shy to just flat out ask him. Lyra, Bonbon whispered quietly, so Chris wouldn't hear. Lyra raised a curious eyebrow at Bonbon, then leaned towards her a bit. Yes, she responded quietly, playing along with her secretiveness, even though he's literally. Okay, are we back? You back? Alright, we're back. Okay. That was annoying. Bonbon nodded quickly. Lyra giggled a bit before scooting closer to her. Alright, I'll tell you what he really likes, she said as she leaned in to whisper some of Chris's more dirty kinks directly into Bonbon's ear. Bonbon turned her head and flicked her ear up so she could hear better. Her eyes started to widen and her cheeks turned a deep crimson. As Lyra quietly explained, she jerked her head back from Lyra, feeling her heart race once she finally understood what Chris liked. Really? She asked nervously. Lyra nodded. It's simple, I know, but it drives him wild. I don't know if I can... Don't worry, I'll help you, Lyra said quickly as she hopped to her heels, turning towards Chris. Her horn glowed brightly as she used her magic to gently push him back. What's going on? Chris asked, confused, laying back into the field of fire lilies. Don't worry about it, big guy. Lyra reassured him with a wink. Bonnie wants to take over for a bit. She walked over to his side, then patted his thigh gently with a looking back to Bonbon with a half-lit gaze. Your seat awaits you, she teased. Bonbon whimpered nervously, fidgeting with her hooves before swallowed the lump in her throat. She was feeling a little unsure of herself, not confident in her abilities to act out this particular fetish for Chris. Not to mention how weird this position would be. She just wasn't good at this sort of thing. But she got up on shaky hooves regardless, preparing herself for what was to come. Chris watched Bonbon curiously as she got up, then walked over to him. She sat down on his thighs, straddling him with his aching erection. Directly in front of her, she scooted up a bit, brushing his sensitive underside against her soft coat, letting his length rest between her delicate breasts, causing him to flinch a bit. Bonbon adjusted herself slightly, unintentionally tickling Chris's member as it shifted between her teats, then placed her shaky hooves around his styling hood, holding him there for a moment. Once she was settled, Chris looked up at her with a confused expression. Lyra quickly hopped up and got behind Bonbon. She sat on Chris's legs, then wrapped her forelegs around Bonbon's cute little tummy before scooting up so that her stomach was flat against... Wait, what? Before scooting up so that her stomach was flat against her back. Once she was in position, she leaned her head next to her lover, then smiled playfully as she gazed down at the bewildered human beneath them. Ready, Bonnie? Alright. Bonbon nodded nervously, then took in a deep breath before slowly lifting her hips up on wobbly legs. Still holding on to Chris's heart, confident he was lined up, she let gravity take over and dropped down quickly, taking all of him inside her all at once. As she impaled herself on him, she moaned softly in surprise, feeling that wonderful rush of warmth, stretch, and wonderful rush of warmth, stretch, and fill her now overly sensitive love tunnel. No, Ace, no. This is just like a couple chapters. Chris sucked in a breath through clenched teeth once he was consumed again by Bonbon's amazingly warm and strong body. Bonnie, he groaned. Bonbon's legs quivered and her body twitched a few times as she squeezed down on him, welcoming him back inside. She closed her eyes and took a moment to catch her breath, placing her... Lyra nuzzled Bonbon's cheek. Okay, Bonnie, she said in a quiet whisper, tilting her lips towards Bonbon's ear. Tell him this. Bonbon opened her eyes and whimpered nervously as her blush deepened once Lyra told her what to say. She wasn't sure she could even say it. It was so dirty and embarrassing, but at the same time it was something that she wanted herself. The only problem was she had to repeat it out loud for Chris to hear with his ears. You okay, Bonnie? Chris asked in concern after she went silent for a while. Bonbon shifted nervously, gazing down at him with an unsure look. It was now or never. Chris, Bonbon called to him shyly, causing him to look into her eyes. She darted to her sights between him and his waist they were connected, not daring to look at him directly. Do you want to she hesitated, struggling with the last part. To come inside me? Chris's eyes widened in disbelief at hearing those words escape her lips. His styling hood gave an eager twitch inside her. What? He asked, dumbfounded, making sure he heard her right. Bonbon could feel him responding to her words, causing a small shiver to run down her spine. That silly little sentence really was having an effect, it seemed. I love how little things can just turn somebody on. Lyra giggled and leaned in to whisper more lines into Bonbon's ear. Bonbon squeaked in embarrassment, then looked back to Chris. Please, Chris, she said in a bashful tone. trying her best to sound sexy and seductive for him. Pour your hot come into my room. She started to roll her hips in a small circle, causing her tips to grind against her silky, textured walls. Bonnie, Chris groaned in shock as his member pulsed, giving several eager twitches inside her. He slid his hands up and down her thighs as his hips started to flex upward. Baba couldn't believe the responses she was getting from him. He really did like the dirty talk. Don't we all? It was even starting to have an effect on her. She couldn't deny that she wanted him to do all the things she was saying, no matter how perverted it sounded. Lyra grinned devilishly, letting her right hoof slide down between their bodies. Making its way to her aching and dripping marehood, she started to rub herself in small, tight circles, holding Bonbon close to her as she peered down at Chris. Bonnie. She panted as she continued to play with herself and whispered more things for her to say and do into Bonbon's ear. Bonbon nodded softly, panting every now and then. Come on, big guy, she cooed with a little more confidence in her voice, working her hips a little harder, rolling them around in wider circles. But fill me with your... She couldn't bring herself to blurt out the last word Lyra wanted to say, so she improvised, hoping Chris would still like it. Love. Fuck, Bonnie. Chris groaned in a shaky voice, gripping her thighs as his hips started to roll against hers. Lyra was panting heavily now, still stimulating herself as she continued to coach Bonbon, whispering more lewd things into her ear. Bonbon bit her lip, preparing herself for what she needed to do next. I'm not going to stop, she started to say, pushing her hips up on wobbly legs until half of Chris's member was exposed to the cold air of the forest. Until you give me everything. With that, she dropped down, letting gravity take over as she impaled herself his throbbing length, causing her to cry out, feeling stretched to her very core once again. Chris bared his teeth and shivered in delight, grasping Bonbon's security marks firmly, as every inch of his solid member was crammed deep inside her. Before he could recover, she quickly lifted her hips up again and dropped back down, hitting him for a second time. Boom, boom, boom. I don't know what you mean, Ace, but is it always like this? Baba moaned loudly as her oversensitive marehood was assaulted with intense pleasure, feeling his tip kiss her cervix every time she dropped down. Her mind buzzed and her legs trembled from the intense stimulation, but she fought through it for him, moving up and down the best she could. It didn't take her long to find her balance and rhythm, bouncing herself off his hips every time they slapped together. His hands dug into her flanks, sending chills down her spine. He helped support her, getting her movements and making it easier for her weak, trembling legs to lift her up. Lyra moaned as she rubbed herself even faster, watching all the cute expressions Chris was making as Bonbon desperately tried to milk him with her body. Her horn started to glow all on its own as she continued to watch the single most arousing thing she had ever seen. You like that, Chris? Bonbon whispered between her heavy breathing as she slammed down on top of him over and over again. Feeling confident enough to try her own line, you like it when my vagina hugs your penis? Lyra giggled lightly between her heavy breathing, feeling proud of her lover for at least trying. Yeah. Bonbon didn't hear Lyra's giggles. All she could hear were the loud groans and grunts of pleasure coming from Chris after she said those words. You feel amazing, Bonnie? Chris groaned loud. That was one sentence. I just fucked up that. You feel amazing, Bonnie. Chris groaned weakly in response to her questions. He started to hump upwards, meeting her halfway as their bodies collided, shoving everything he had inside her. Bonbon could feel him start to swell, stretching her out even more. It had to be a sign that he was close, and her whole body trembled in anticipation at what was to come. Come inside me, please, she breathed without a second thought, no longer needing Lyra's prompts. Her oversensitive and aching marehood convulsed around him, massaging his length as she increased her efforts, hammering her hips into him. Please, oh please, come inside me, Chris. She was begging for her own sake now, breathing heavily as she lost herself to her primal and perverted urges. Her own climax was building quickly, but she was too focused on Chris to notice she wanted to feel him release everything he had inside her. And she wasn't going to stop until he did. I want it all, please. Nice. Nice, Emma. Alright, we're almost done. We're almost done for this chapter. Shit. Lyra was losing herself to the scene before her, feeling her own and quickly approaching as her hoof worked furiously and her horn glowed brightly. Seeing the loves of her life finally come together was pure bliss to her. Their moans and cries of pleasure combined to make a beautiful sound that caused Lyra's heart to flutter and sent chills down her spine. I'm so close, Bonnie, Chris growled, gripping Bonbon's hips firmly, halting her movements as he held her down against his hips, burying himself inside her as far as he could go. Yes, Chris. Bonbon moaned loudly, feeling his tip swell deep inside her. Her vaginal muscles convulsed and squeezed him, desperately trying to milk him for everything he had. Give it to me, please. I want to feel it inside me. She cried in desperation, not caring about or even hearing what she was saying anymore. Oh, Bonnie, Chris cried loudly as he arched his hips up off the ground, lifting both Bonbon and Lyra up as his tension finally broke. His member throbbed eagerly, shooting powerful bursts of his seed deep into Bonbon's suckling murderhood, flooding her womb instantly. Bonbon cried loudly as her eyes widened in shock. She could feel hot streams of thick liquid splashing against her deepest barrier, pulling inside her very core. His member throbbed and pulsated, sending a never-ending volley of constant warmth deep inside her. Deep inside, feeling her more and more, another orgasm rocked her helpless and exhausting body. Letting loose what little mercum she had left, letting it coat Chris's hips as she came for the third time that day. Hearing both her lovers' cries was enough to send Lyra off the edge herself. Her horn glowed with an intense golden light, then exploded into a golden shower of dancing lights that scattered around the forest. She cried out loudly as she held onto her lover, nuzzling closer to her trembling body as her orgasm sent her to new heights. Bonbon's mind buzzed with ecstasy, reveling in the pleasure of Chris's warm essence coating her insides. Her body embraced him passionately, trying to draw out everything he had, sending blissful chills down her spine. She clenched down on Chris in a futile attempt to save as much of his exotic seed as possible, but it was no use. There was just too much for a stretched passage to hold. It started to dribble out from the union, dripping down Chris's sack and onto the soft ground of the forest beneath them. Even though Chris couldn't really get her pregnant and she wasn't in heat, the experience alone warmed her core and made her feel more like a mother, even if it was just a fantasy. She loved this feeling so much more with Chris than she ever did with Silverwing, that bastard. It felt absolutely wonderful. It felt right. Man, we're almost done with this chapter. Oh, okay, good. It's giggity, Maddie, okay? I'm pretty sure you're trying to say giggity. Chris quivered as his orgasm tapered off. His hands and body relaxed, letting go of Bonbon as his hips slowly lowered to the ground. Bonbon followed soon after, shutting her eyes before going limp and falling onto Chris's heaving chest, with Lyra falling down with her. The trio stayed there in a heaving pile of sweat and musk as they all tried desperately to catch their breaths and come back from the clouds. Lyra slowly rolled off to the side, falling next to Chris's right in a blissful daze. Bonbon did much the same, collapsing next to Chris's left side. After gathering parts of his mind, Chris slid his arms under both mares, holding them close to his body in a loving embrace. Both Lyra and Bonbon reciprocated, wrapping one hoof over his body as they clung onto him lovingly. The small herd stayed like that for a long time, reveling in their afterglow as they held on to each other in the forest of fire lilies. Alright. Man, one more chapter. Cause Christ. Alright, part 3, the last one. I got it. Okay, yes, it's all happening. What? Maddie, what? Ugh. Okay. Alright. Kinda hate myself for fucking deleting these 2 chapters. Kinda hate that. Now I'm live streaming it. Who knows? Anyways. Part 3, here we go. Baba lay next to her naked cult friend, resting her head on his chest. She sighed in contentment after having made love with him and her mare friend Lyra, who was snuggling against Chris's other side, purring happily. She opened her eyes and looked towards the unicorn, noticing the happy smile across her lips as she nosed her head just under their stallion's chin. Lyra truly was a beautiful mare. Baba smiled out to herself as she gazed upon the joyful and relaxed unicorn, then looked up to her cult friend, who was taking in the dusking sky above. Amazing, Chris whispered in awe. Baba reluctantly raised her head off of Chris's warm body, then gazed up at the golden sky through the tree tops. Rays of fading sunlight shone through the leaves, illuminating the tiny specks of fire lily pollen that floated through the air, creating a beautiful and relaxing atmosphere that brought back many nostalgic memories to her. She would often spend many late afternoons in this forest, completing homework, reading, or just relaxing at the end of the day. I can see why you would spend so much time in a place like this, Chris said softly, running his hand through the back of her curly mane. Baba blinked and looked back to Chris, meeting his eyes as he smiled at her. She smiled back with a light blush. It is beautiful, she admitted, looking over the forest fondly. It really is, Lyra added, lifting her head from the safety of Chris's neck as she peered around. I'm glad I could finally see this place for myself. I always remembered you telling me stories about it when we were fillies, and I always tried to picture it in my mind. Is it what you thought it would be like? Bob asked curiously. Lyra shook her head. Not at all. It's so much better than that. It really sucks that this was all. All of this will be gone in a few days. That's sad. Baba nodded her head in silent agreement. I'm just grateful I got a chance to see it again, she said with a blush, taking in that made me tear up. Taking in a slow breath through her nose, letting the sweet fragrance of fresh fire lilies fill her nostrils before looking back to her loved ones. But I'm even happier that I got to share this part of my past with both of you. I honestly can't express how much this moment means to me, but thank you both so much for this wonderful gift. Man, gotta be in the feels now. I'm in the feels now. Lyra and Chris both smiled at her lovingly. You're welcome, Bonnie, Chris said, leaning in to steal a small kiss from the blushing mare. I guess this means I can start calling you my call-friend now, Bonbon said with a half-lit gaze as she looked into Chris's eyes and turned towards Lyra. And after all these years, I can finally call you my mare friend. Took you long enough, Lyra teased with a wink, sticking her tongue out. They both giggled before exchanging a small and loving kiss. So, Chris said, rubbing them on the back, causing the two mares to look at him curiously. Since we're going to be a herd now, whose house are we going to live in? Well, Bonbon started to say but paused, drawing a little line in Chris's chest with her hoof. I was kind of hoping we could all move into your place. Yeah, you can listen to this one. This one's an enjoy. Like this story, Ace. Like, hold up, guys that are listening to this on. The story Ace is, it's enjoyable, and there is some moments like this, like the last chapter I just read. It's a cute story. I will say you should read it. I mean, listen to it. I guess, read it, listen to it. One of those two. But you have to start with Lyra's confession, because this is a sequel to Lyra's confession. Yeah, there we go. That's how that works. Okay, took you long enough, Lyra teased with a wink, sticking her tongue out. They both giggled before exchanging a small and loving kiss. Alright, so never mind. I'm right here. That's where I am at. So since we're gonna be a herd now, whose house are we going to live in? Well, Bonbon started to say, but paused, drawing a little line in Chris's chest with her hoof. I was kind of hoping we could all move into your place. My place? Chris questioned. Why is that? Your home is pretty nice and closer to town than mine. Yes, but your house is a lot larger, Bonbon pointed out softly. Plus, I really like the location it's in. It's just far enough away where it's not too inconvenient to walk into town, and we can have our privacy. I were not in agreement, and your home is custom made for you already, so you don't have to keep ducking your head when you walk through doors, she added happily with a soft giggle. Chris ran his hand through his hair, rubbing the top of his head. Yeah, I guess that's a good point. Also, your bed is really big. We can fit all of us on it, Bonbon pointed out shyly. Can it? Lyra questioned with a teasing smirk. I don't know about that one, Bonnie. Maybe we should test it. Test that. Bonbon giggled, then hummed, tapping a hoof to her chin in a mock thought. You know, maybe we should test it a few times just so we can get more accurate results. she teased with a sly grin. Lyra's eyes widened in shocked surprise, not expecting Bonbon to play along, but she quickly composed herself. Yeah, she shouted excitedly. Yeah, oh shit. I agree. I mean, I agree. I mean, yeah, we want to really make sure it can fit all of us, and we should also test its durability, you know, because it's better to be safe than sorry. Chris laughed loudly, holding both mirrors close to him. I'm liking this idea, he admitted, wiggling his eyebrows in a playful manner. Count me in for testing. Bonbon giggled before humming playfully at him. Well, maybe if you're a good colt, she teased before leaning in and kissing him gingerly. Chris reciprocated, pressing his lips to hers. As he placed a hand on the back of her mane, his tongue pressed up against her entrance, and she gladly opened, allowing their wet muscles to slowly dance around each other. They let their embrace linger for a moment, to pulling back. I love you, Bonnie, he said softly. His words sent pleasurable tingles down her spine. She loved hearing him say that. Silver told her the same thing, but it always felt so hollow and empty. Chris was different. His words were warm, honest, and true. He really did love her. He just like Lyra did. I love you too, Chris, she cooed, laying her head back down onto his chest, wrapping her hoof around his barrel. Chris turned to Lyra and placed his hand behind her head, then gently guided her to lean towards him. And I love you, Lyra. Bonbon watched as their lovers kissed. They tilted their heads to the side as they leaned in, letting their tongues dance around each other. After a while, they slowly pulled apart, leaving behind a small line of saliva that connected them for a moment before it thinned out into nothing. It was a very arousing and pleasurable scene for her to watch, and she pouted a bit when they broke it off. Lyra giggled softly, licking her lips as she leaned back. And I love you too, big guy. She cooed before joining Bonbon in lying down on his chest, shutting her eyes once she was comfortable. Bonbon let out a happy and content sigh, thinking Lyra had a pretty good idea. Chris was just so warm and cuddly, like a big teddy bear. She never wanted to leave this spot. Chris laid his head back into the field of flowers and ran his hand through both Lyra and Bonbon's manes, looking up to the darkening sky. They stayed like that, embracing each other and letting the sounds of the forest wash over them. Chris spoke up. Girls, he called to softly, moving his hands to scratch behind both of their ears. Oh, sweet Celestia, did Bonbon love it when he did that. Both mares hummed their responses in delight as he leaned into his hands. It's getting pretty dark out, Chris pointed out. We should probably go back and find our stuff, then set up camp. Just 5 more minutes. Bonbon just muttered softly as she snuggled closer to his body. She wasn't ready to get up anytime soon, as she was half tempted to just ask them both to stay there with her forever. Yeah, we got plenty of time, Lyra added, yawning loudly. Let's just chill out here for a little while longer. Chris chuckled at them both and shook his head before laying back again. Just 5 more minutes. That's all you two get, he said firmly. Lyra groaned softly in disapproval. Fine. Yeah. That's a little bit adorable right there. Ah, there we go. Let me read this. Bonbon smiled and giggled softly at Lyra's adorable pouting. She nuzzled into Chris's body a little more, reaching her hoof over and placed it onto Lyra's. Enjoying what little time was left to cuddle with her lover, she thought to herself a bit while Chris went back to gently petting her mane with that magical hand of his. She just couldn't believe how much her life had changed in such a short time, and she couldn't have been happier about it. She was in a herd now with the loves of her life, something that she honestly never expected to happen so soon, if at all. It was a wonderful feeling. Truly, it was the best day of her life. Alright, that's the end. And like the image before you... Okay, can I open this up in an image thing? Thank you guys for joining me on this. Okay, this is the second time I read this. Well, it still got me in the feels. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'm not laggy right now. And here, there's gonna be like a VOD of this anyways. You're fine, brother. You know, I think I would like you to be involved with all the bullshit that I've been doing, because I'm out here. I already sold Jacob a horse. What do you want, sir? I'll get you a car, I'll get you anything. I'll get you a truck for 1 mil, 150. We got this. I'll sell a banana peel. I'll sell a banana.